promising, but kind of depends on.
My buddies, we did it that way.
Yeah.
Stayed in Seward. It's kind of more fun staying.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this extra special start of fiscal year meeting. This one's going to be a little different. I have almost nothing to share from me. This is really going to be utilities meeting, and then Gabe and Keith are going to present a little bit on some stormwater updates as well. So we will kick it off. And everyone online can hear us, right? Or are we muted? Muted. No, hold on.
I can hear you, Shauna.
This is Timmy, but thank you. Wait. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for confirming that you can hear me. So just brief updates. Some of this you may already know. So the first is related to the Public Works Department. Matt Horn is no longer the Public Works Director. He has taken on a new position related to some of our major infrastructure projects in the city, primarily Prado Road, the overpass and the bridge. And so those projects really needed someone with a lot of background in that and someone who could take it and run with it because they are incredibly important to our future. And so he is going to be working on those things. And in the interim, because you can't get enough Aaron Floyd is double directoring as both the Public Works and the Utilities Director. So anything that you might have previously worked with Matt on, you can direct to Aaron. And I just want to note that the Utilities team, is sharing their director with Public Works. And so thank you to the deputy directors in both Public Works and Utilities for taking on a little bit extra. But we don't want things to fall through the cracks. So if you need anything, you can always reach out to Aaron. You can reach out to me or any of the deputies in the departments. The other update I have is that Mike Lowe is no longer the building official. He has moved on to more exciting things. And so we are temporarily without a full-time building official in the city. And in the interim, we are contracting with JAS Consultants. We're using Ian Livingston, who's kind of our as-needed building official. So we obviously need a building official. We have someone through a consultant that can help us with all of those needs. And again, in the interest of not having things fall through the cracks, if there's anything you need, feel free to reach out to me. John Mezapeza is kind of interim deputy director over on that side. Come on in. Hi. And so we're looking at the Building and Safety Division, how that's set up, and recruiting for that position as soon as we can. So I wanted to provide that update as well. But again, if you need anything, if you're not hearing back from someone, we're trying to fill that hole. So feel free to please reach out to me if you need anything. And those are my big updates for now, other than I kind of alluded to this start of the fiscal year, which is exciting for us because that means our work program, our items are going to get underway. So I just remind you all, if you're interested to go look at what the council adopted, there's a lot of things related to development. And then just yesterday, there's some new CEQA changes and some things happening at the state law that I've just been trying to absorb this morning, but those will absolutely be topics for us to discuss in some upcoming meetings. And with that, I will hand it over to Utilities Department to talk about sewer laterals.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yep.
Before we jump in, a quick outline here of the topics we're going to be going through, but wanted to start with some introductions around the room, and we have a few folks remotely that'll be joining us. So I can start. Chris Lehman, I'm the wastewater deputy director.
I'm Keith Schwaneman, Stormwater Program Manager.
Brad Brickwall, Wallace Group.
Matt Qualino, Qualino Properties.
Joel Woodruff, Covelop.
Jimmy Summer, Covelop. John Tricamo Construction.
Greg Wynn, Architect.
Ryan Beach, Wastewater Collections Supervisor.
Miguel Barcenas, Deputy Director for Utilities.
Andy Pease, Inbound Screen Consulting.
Aaron Floyd, Utilities Director and Interim Public Works Director.
Timmy Tway, Community Development Director.
Gabriel Munoz Morris, Supervising Civil Engineer and Community Development.
Lala Stowe, supervising admin assistant.
And do we have people online? Can you just chime in and tell us who you are?
I can start. My video is disabled, though. I'd be happy to turn it on, but it's disabled by the host. Jeff Pells with West Yost Associates, consultant to the city for the infrastructure program update.
Chris Malone is I'm also with West Yost. I also have my video disabled. Also working on this collection system master plan.
And this is Patrick Johnston, also from West Yost, and I work with Chris and Jeff on the same project.
Stephen Peck with Tech Planning.
Aaron Abbott with Abbott Reed.
And Nico Gurney, City of Slow Engineering and Planning.
And Shauna.
No, Shauna Scott, City of Slow, Utilities, Engineering and Planning.
Awesome.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Our West Coast team is on for any technical questions related to the project that we're going to present today. So I wanted to start off, rewind a little bit of the background of the program, how we ended up where we're at today, and then we're going to provide some updates on what we've learned with the most recent study. So taking a step back, again, setting the stage, the city had settled a lawsuit with an NGO, Riverwatch, back in July of 2016. And the basis of the lawsuit, it was all centered around sanitary sewer overflows, sewer spills. And at one period in time, we had a really big issue with overflows from the sewer. So in response, and as a part of that settlement, the city committed to a number of programs that we were, going to roll out to manage the risk and reduce spills. And that was all led to the adoption of our, what we're calling our private sewer lateral programs. There's a number of programs. I think the one in focus today is the offset program. But that was all adopted in 2019. The terms of that lawsuit have concluded and sunset, but there are remaining risks that the city is considering related to future litigation and any penalties associated with the spills that occur. So background of that, looking forward, and really this has been an issue. It'll continue to be an issue. We're hoping to provide some updates on progress made. But we have an old system, both on the private and public side, infiltration and intrusion issues related to root intrusion, old materials, Orangeburg pipe, clay pipe, just falling apart. We know these need to be replaced at some point. And then, impacts of ground settlement, groundwater subsidence, these all lead to failing sewer infrastructure. And then, looking into the future, the city's stance is we're trying to accommodate an increasing customer base, build out of the general plan, want to support that responsibly. And through this lens, it all centers around capacity of the sewer system and minimizing sewer spill potential. So just a bit of the background, and we're going to fast forward to today, but any questions about that for those not as familiar?
I'm curious, were there monetary penalties?
Monetary penalties from the water board, yes. Those vary based on the spill size. So they could be up to $500,000. They could be a couple $1,000s.
Did the city pay any?
We have, yes. Yep. And then outside of that, I can't speak to the settlement terms of that lawsuit. I don't know if we paid any settlement monies. I don't believe we did. I think we basically just committed to, you have to do something. Here's what we're going to do. And Riverwatch agreed to those terms, and they said that's acceptable. We're going to settle. And I don't know if there's anything you could add to that one, Aaron.
More nuanced of paying for their attorneys and the like, but that was all kind of behind the scenes on that. Yeah. But Chris, what is the standard fine right now for wastewater spill per gallon?
So it's $3,000, and again, if you have a 500,000 gallon spill, this could be in the millions of dollars.
So how they break it down, yeah, it's a minimum fee, then they can charge you up to $10 a gallon. I know we're anticipating gas prices probably getting that high pretty soon, but it's higher than the current gas prices per gallon.
$10,
so if you
right.
think if you're getting into the thousands of gallons of sewer spill, it can get very costly.
1 gallon of sewage and 1,000 gallons of water is 1,000 gallons of sewage now. So that's.
So you said the settlement agreement has sunsetted?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that's
10-year
important, right? Because the part of the kind of messaging from the city is we can't do anything about this because we're under the terms of the settlement agreement.
Correct.
And so that part, I understand that we're probably going to hear a pitch about how we can't spill.
Sure.
But the part about legally being bound by a settlement agreement is now over.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we thought that was important to share with this group. I mean, full transparency, yeah, those terms have. And as Chris spoke to, obviously, and you're going down the road that we're already going down too, there are still risks, environmental health, as well as additional lawsuits in the future. But it is an open conversation.
Well, yeah, from an advocacy standpoint, right, that has been a huge roadblock to even beginning the discussion about like, hey, is this a worthwhile impediment to development? Right. Because we were working under that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody online? Okay. Taking a step back again, building the foundation. So 2015, we completed a capacity study, really a master plan for the publicly owned sewer system. And within that study, part of it's to define improvements on the city infrastructure, but again, the focus of today is capacity. And that 2015 project, what we're calling the wastewater collections infrastructure renewal strategy. It's a long title. I've abbreviated it in slides moving forward, but that study produced these capacity constrained areas of the sewer, which are in place today. And there's 3 major areas that were defined. With that, capacity limitations, part of that's on the city side. We identified improvements that need to be made, both at lift stations and sewer mains. And we've done a lot of work to make progress in rerouting flows, upsizing lift stations. And then an additional layer to that is if we can get all the flow to the wastewater plant, can we treat it? And it turns out that we had some concerns there. So with the WRF project, which is finalizing completion in the next 2 months, we're very close. With that WRF project, one of the things we did was double the size of our stormwater capacity. So we doubled from 4.5 million to 9 million gallons of flow just to accommodate that I&I. Reason being, our normal flows into the sewer plant are around 3 million gallons a day. When we reach those storm flow peaks, we can see as much as 24 million gallons, and that's all the result of an infiltration and intrusion during a big storm. So we know we have a problem. We have made some improvements, but 2 issues, conveyance and then treatment capacity. So treatment capacity has been addressed through this current project, and we're really focusing on the collection system and remaining capacity issues that we have today.
Chris, not to get into the weeds, but one thing that's important is it's difficult to measure flows through sewer pipe because we don't have a water meter, obviously. So with this study, we deployed temporary feeders that strap onto the pipe. And so that's how we were able to surgically identify the problem areas.
Right. So that study, same approach for the recent study, flow meters out in the system, trying to capture the peak flow events during the storm, which we did during the recent study. And then I'll hit it a little bit later in the slide, but one of the things Ryan and his team is doing is to deploy permanent flow monitoring. So we don't want to wait 10 years to update our model. And so we're going to have more real-time data to make assessments and hopefully be more agile in making adjustments. So I'll speak to that a bit later, but wanted to just provide that basis with the last study before we talk about the updates. So progress made. Again, we've made a number of improvements with the city-owned mains, lift stations. One of the things that Ryan and his team have done is to deploy, we call smart cover monitors, and we have known capacity choke points in the system. Our main game, or really the top concern, is to prevent a spill. And so Ryan and his team have deployed 15 sensors. It's going to level monitor and alert staff before a spill occurs. So while we address these capacity issues, we have some network of risk management to get an early alert for a spill. And that's one of the primary reasons on the city side, if we look at a trend, and I have a graph coming up, but we peaked at 34 sewer spills in 2021, kind of the worst of it. And this year, as of today, we've only had one from the city infrastructure. Still some issues on the private side. We've had significant amount of spills from private sewer laterals, still some issues there. But we are managing risk on city infrastructure. So I'll get into that trend a bit more. A few other improvements, trying to put some numbers out. You know, we have this offset program since 2019. Through the offset program, voluntary replacements, we've completed about 675 lateral replacements. With last year's ordinance update, we did, we're trying to allow some discretion and a path for certain projects to move forward. And one of the changes to the ordinance was to allow for an on-site credit for single family homes. Say you want to build an ADU. If you replace your lateral that's bad, that will count as the credit for the new flow. And the thought there is it's supposed to be net neutral impact, right? You add flow, you're fixing some flow. So that was a change that we made last year. Rebate program.
I was going to throw out a good change. I think we all appreciated that. What's that? A good change. We all appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Another incentive trying to alleviate some of the financial burden is we do have this rebate program in place that was increased to $4,000 last year. We've done about 350 rebates since 2019. I would anticipate that'll pick up with the increased dollar amount. We're doing additional outreach, getting a lot of interest, and Ryan gets a lot of calls. So that program will remain in place. With the increased amount, we have increased the funding available for that program from $250,000 to $450,000 a year. And that's on a first come, first served basis, limited pot of money. We will issue all the rebates that we have funding available for. And then the last item to speak to improvements on this collection system side is we have an inspection program. Part of the issue is on private side, we just don't know all the conditions of the system. About 140 miles of private infrastructure. There's about 52% that we have just don't know the condition. And so through that inspection program, either upon a home sale or other conditions, we're getting this data, start to flow in. And I'll speak to that a bit later, but part of the issue is just knowing where the issues are, where to focus attention. And so that program continues, and I will speak to it later, but one of the things we've heard again and again and again is trying to find offsets. So I'll touch on it a bit later, but I think we have an idea that we're hopeful to roll out in the fall that will help support that. But that inspection program has been really helpful for the city to focus on problem areas. And then lastly, we spoke to back at the treatment plant, doubling capacity to accommodate this storm flow. And so that the treatment plant side, we feel confident we're good. Getting the flow there, again, remains a concern in certain areas of the town.
So that 675 offset and voluntary replacements, that's inclusive of probably the 350 people that got rebates.
Correct.
So we didn't replace 1,000, we've replaced 675.
Yes. since 2019.
And we can assume that the 350 were all voluntary.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Does the program apply to commercial properties as well, or just residential?
For rebates?
Yeah.
Just residential, as it stands now, single family home.
Okay.
And I know there's been some questions and suggestions about expanding that qualifying dates. We're continuing to look at that. Part of the issue is just available funding. And so that's something we'll continue to look at. If we can find additional sources of money to expand that program, I think it's something we'd like to do. But yeah, as it stands now, single family home would be the qualifying applicants for that. So again, the graph talked about the numbers. I think my data set might be slightly off here, but peaking at 35 spills from our system in 2021. As of this year, 1. So big improvement. The dark blue line is trending the private sewer lateral spills, which it's been relatively flat. We haven't seen increases, but we really haven't seen those numbers come down. And the thought is we're making progress on the private side, but we have a very old town. Again, 50% of the system is unknown. There's a lot of clay pipe out there. There's still Orangeburg laterals that are failing. And so you could look at it as we've stabilized, but we still have an issue, I guess is one way to look at it. And then the other point to point out on this graph, you'll see a flat line 2019 to 2021. What happened there? There were no private spills. There were. We had a change in our reporting requirements to the water board and just don't have confident data to present before that date. So I would say that trend is probably flat back into the past as well.
How are private spills reported? How do you know that data?
Good question.
I can let you know. So the majority of our sewer response is for responding to private sewer lateral spills. And so we have to follow strict reporting guidelines. Say if we get a phone call saying, hey, there's a liquid flowing down the street, it's going in the storm system, it's going in the creek, we'll respond out, take photos, we'll clean up, and at that point it triggers an NOV. There's a lot of other things that trigger that, but we're collecting all of that data. We're trying to protect the public, protect the environment.
And you'll get the call from either the homeowner
Exactly.
or police department or anybody that sees it early.
So, and at that point, that's going to trigger us to add this into the system. There's so many circumstances where a homeowner is like, hey, my home's backed up, it's not spilling. So we necessarily wouldn't report it per the state guidelines. So it wouldn't go into this metrics, but we're like, call a plumber, you have to maintain, the sewer lateral. So.
Okay. Good question. Spoke to this. Here's the data. These are the database of private sewer laterals in the city. Approximately 13,500. 52%, 54%. We just don't know the condition. Hasn't been reported yet. We have some assumptions based on the home construction date, things like that. But about 40%, 41% we've identified as being in good condition, which is great. Another 2% failed or fair, and then there's a small fraction that are identified to be in poor condition, and those would be the laterals that would qualify as offsets, right? Those are the ones you want to replace. So the big push here into the fall will be in that no condition gray zone of trying to get some additional data, and we have an outreach program developed to incentivize people to opt in to an offset program. And I'll get into that a bit later, but the idea is, the opportunity, we don't know your condition of your lateral, consider getting it inspected. If it's in poor condition, it could qualify to get replaced under the offset program. So we know there's a gap there. We know there's an opportunity to do some matchmaking. But there's a big unknown, right, of that half of the city on the private side. Any questions on
If I
that?
could just make one comment, just as a graphic person, can you make good green instead of red? Failed red, that would match the city portal, the sewer portal too, where we
Point.
see green laterals and red laterals.
Yeah, I could, that'd be easy.
Graphically,
to-
it's just confusing, sorry.
For sure. No, that's easy comment.
Like an architect. Tell
I
us.
know it.
I love it.
And
Thank you.
is this private laterals within the current offset zones or in the entire
That's full
city?
city. Yeah. But the idea again would be, once we finalize the new boundaries of what's going to be capacity constrained, that's where we're going to focus our outreach. Is we're probably going to go beyond that, but primary target is in those areas, all the unknowns, all the bads. Let's get those people to opt in. That opt-in symbol would be on the portal on the map here. So speaking to the green and the red, this is where a new symbol would be populated. These people have all opted in to be considered for the offset program. Any questions on this? This is our portal that's available to the public. slowcity.org/laterals will take you to that portal. And anyone, I don't know if everyone's used this, but you can plug in the address of the property that you're trying to get information on, and it takes you right to that sewer lateral. And our known condition will be displayed: installation date, last inspected, condition rating. So that's what we're using as a hub to try to channel these offsets. And the hope is in the future that would be a better tool than door-to-door knocking, outreach, whatever else other methods y'all have tried to find offsets through. It's not an easy process. So this is will be our effort to help with that workflow.
I think we got 2 comments from property owners saying like, how do I know this is not a scam? Okay, people knocking on the door. So this would allow the city to add a way to certify that this is a program that's valid.
And we would be taking a middleman approach to basically signing a disclosure form. We're going to back out. We're going to post the symbology on the map, and then the other matchmaking work happens behind the scenes. We're not going to be able to recommend any contractors. We're not going to help with the facilitation. But the idea is all the data would be here as a starting point. So we might even hold a separate meeting to get some feedback once we have that outreach developed and ready to roll out. But I'm hopeful that'll be progress in the right direction with that offset finding. Any other questions on that one? Okay, fast forward to today. We've started a new master plan flow study project with West Yost, again on the line for any technical questions, but study started in the fall of 2024. We began flow monitoring. The project is anticipated to be completed in the next 2 weeks. We wanted to meet today to give a bit of a sneak peek on new capacity boundaries that we're proposing. Again, in bold italics underlined, these are draft, haven't been finalized yet, but very close to getting to that point. These new boundaries would redefine the current capacity constrained areas of the collection system. It would also identify improvements on the city side, and it really validates a lot of the assumptions of the last study. And we're finding that, conditions have changed, and we want to update the model to reflect that. Mentioned, Ryan and his team installing permanent flow monitoring. That's going to be a huge benefit. Another improvement internally that the city has is a new modeling software that Miguel and his team will have access to. And the thought is that this will allow some in-house modeling for capacity limitations. Bulk of that work will likely require contracting with West Yost to do that analysis. But it'll assist staff in potentially rerouting flows if we have mainline replacements scheduled. And then that software integrates directly into GIS, which, all that being said, we're hoping that this will allow more agile updates to the model and not have to wait another 10 years to update the new boundaries. Anything on that one? Okay. Moment of truth. 2015 current boundaries as displayed on the left. And then these, I'll skip forward to a standalone slide, but the layer in pink are the new draft proposed boundaries for the collection system. You'll see that the Laguna area has been entirely removed. The downtown area has not been removed. It's been reduced and shifted north a bit, which we can get into. But just a side by side, and then maybe pause here. But this is what the current draft capacity boundaries.
Roughly a 50% reduction, Chris, on the constrained area.
50% in the number of laterals or 50% in
Acres.
acres?
Surface area.
Yeah, so, yeah.
So I was thinking this would be, I have some more, but this would be the focus of the discussion. I do have some next steps on where we're headed, but any initial thoughts or feedback on this draft?
Just trying to capture the place. It looks like kind of Monterey Heights, Grove Street, kind of those areas, just right, what color? If I can, northeast of the railroad, and
it's possible.
High school, is that San Luis
If I can do that
Drive?
on a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
San Luis Drive, yeah, back up in there. Just trying to capture that. And then the other part looks like the Choro kind of corridor expanded a little bit up in that upper left corner. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
We go back a slide so you have that blue overlay. I want to say this in a kind way.
Your own kind, go for it.
But is it just bad data, or did you guys, because it's like, really, there's no way that this shift in area could have been through changing conditions in the last 5 years. There hasn't been that amount of infrastructure work. So I heard at the beginning of this presentation how we're pinpoint accuracy, and so did we just not have good data previously? Because that's a pretty big shift. And also, like, if that truly is the area that needs to be focused on, all the people in that areas that got completely removed, that's not super cool. That's actually pretty rough. That's like overnight we were an entire standard deviation away from where we were supposed to be in space wise, so I don't know. And I don't I'm happy with the new map. Seems to be cool with me. I don't mess with that, but it feels like there's a big question here about the data that you guys had collected previously and sort of the trustworthiness of the data that you have now, if that's that far off.
I think that's a valid comment. I would say that it's a span of 10 years. So we started back in 2015 and we've been able to complete projects in a span of 10 years, essentially. Just in the Laguna Lake area, we replaced the lift station that was $6 million. So in total, I'm going to guess we invested about, on the public side, we invested about 8 million is my guess. And then we also had a partnership with San Luis Ranch to eliminate a lot of the issues that were happening on that little strip that's down there. On the middle section, closer to the hospital, we've been partnering with the county, and in fact, we've got some sewer lines that are currently in construction. So it may seem like an abrupt change, but there's been a lot of projects that we've been coordinating, throughout this 10-year span.
Yeah, it feels like the messaging was, the sewer lateral program is the best way to do this. This is how we're going to get to the result. And when I hear you say, well, we upgraded a $6 million lift station and we worked with a big developer on taking care of a narrow strip that solved all this, it really erodes at our trust in you that, like, oh yeah, the 300 sewer laterals that got replaced in Laguna Lake, or 200, were actually a thing. And it sort of leads down the path of, well, I understand that this was done because you guys were in a lawsuit and this was part of your settlement effort. But like, now might be the time to have a really good, hard look at the city infrastructure that could be fixed that would really move the needle versus these little single laterals. Because like I said, that's a really big change. And for people who have built in those areas and burdened that cost, to hear that like, oh, well, really it's because San Luis Ranch fixed this and we fixed a lift station and I had to spend $15,000 on my neighbor's lateral to build my ADU to solve our housing issue. There's like a kind of a disconnect there. And again, I'm not trying to beat you guys up, but it's just, that's my first probably instinct on this.
And I'm not trying to pile on, but I had a comment whenever when I was reading the report, and my question that I wrote down to myself is this just deferred maintenance on the city's part that's being put on the development community with all the mains? Is a question that I've had for a while. And I hear that point about private lateral issues, but in terms of just kind of volumes, and I understand the problem. And again, I don't want to pile on, but I just want to make sure that the messaging, like John said, gets out properly. That I could see somebody looking at both maps, the slide back, and kind of going, "Oh, this isn't the real problem. The city just moving the area so they can get all those laterals captured too." Right? And that's going to be a concern.
Yeah, it's a fair comment. Jeff or Patrick, not asking you to chime in, but if you have any insights on the shift at that area or the removal of Laguna that you want to add.
I get in big picture wise, I'd be careful to discount the importance of a lateral program, and yes, it's one little bite at a time, but the overall, like if you think about the number of leaks in a system and the sources of infiltration and inflow that cause these capacity problems, it really is, I don't know what the right analogy is, death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, every little bit adds up. And so the only way to approach I&I, not the only way, but an effective way to approach I&I is to seal up as many of those leaks as possible. And so I think that the effect of closing one can't be taken in isolation. You have to look at the impact and the benefit of closing many leaks. And so that's just one kind of general comment, not to devalue, be careful not to devalue the effect of a lateral program and addressing little by little over a long period of time. Capacity constraint, is about pipe capacity, and deciding how to address that problem is a decision that, to be made about where, do you build more capacity or do you fix the root problem, which is too much rainwater getting into the system? And I think anywhere you look at, the answer is both. You need to do both. And so it's a combined effort and both parts are important.
Did the study look at Cal Poly's contribution to I&I, or are they just a volume number? And then the second question is, as Cal Poly builds their own treatment facility, how does that impact this study? Or I'm sure that was taken into account too, I hope.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that we don't need to solve I&I, but there is probably substantial capacity left over at our facility because of the Cal Poly removal.
At the treatment plant?
It's a little more complex, but it's a good point you're raising. So there's two things that'll occur right there. Cal Poly still does own capacity in the city's WRF. They have made that payment and they still do have that share that they will use.
I'm told roughly 13% is what I was told.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So they are also building their on-campus WRF. So for a period of time right now, based on their modeling, where they're looking at their infill, we are anticipating about 4 years where the majority of their flow actually goes over onto the Cal Poly campus. So we do anticipate a little bit less volume coming down for about 4 years. At that point, though, we do anticipate, based on their projections, that they will then reach the capacity of their on-campus wharf, and they will then return those excess flows to the city system. So if the idea is that perhaps we could say, hey, there's a little bit more capacity freed up, I think we might be a little short-sighted in that, knowing that within a 4-year time period,
I
that will come
understand.
back.
I guess the first part of my question was, how do we know Cal Poly is just not putting 20 million gallons of water down the tube?
So Cal Poly is one of the only, it's actually currently the only facility that we actually do directly monitor. So we have a partial flume set up out there. So we actually can tell, and we actually bill Cal Poly by every gallon that they actually do discharge from wastewater. So it is the only, well, we say we don't meter wastewater, Cal Poly would be the asterisk on that statement right there. So we actually do know. And we actually correspondingly bill them for every gallon too. So they have a harsh financial incentive to actually correct their INI. And they actually report to us twice a year when we meet with them on their programs to reduce their INI right there as well. But it is something that does ultimately feed into that system. And that's why we work with them also on that. So it's a good comment you're making on that.
Thank you.
I would stress, on your other comment right there, this is a bit of that black box. I mean, I appreciate your comments right there. And, I had the similar one, like, how can you tell? And I think that the tricky part in this is really being able to tease apart what of the INI problem is from private and what part is from public right there. And that is a challenging part. When we look at it and roughly, for the sake of this conversation, say 50% of the system is private and 50% is public, the approach that we are recommending is that kind of partnership right there to continue to work towards healing the whole system right there so that we can allow infill construction to continue to occur in these areas. The city's system does benefit from the fact that we do have monies coming in from ratepayers that we can turn around and have these larger lift station projects like that, some of the bigger trunk lines. The one we're just replacing right now on Choro, right over here, that pipe was put in 1910. So we obviously, there is older pipes within the city system as well. That's pretty significant that it'll get those clay pipes out of there. That being said, there is no significant capital contributions being put towards the private side of the system as well. So we're seeing a lot of that extra inflow into the system. For the most part, without some kind of a sewer lateral replacement program, half of that system would never be replaced. And it's not like these pipes are getting any better over time. They're continuing to degrade every day they sit out there. So
you're saying 50% linearly, volumetrically
for city.
So
yeah, mileage wise.
Yeah, right. But so the city has the same mileage in private in their infrastructure,
roughly,
but they have much larger pipes. So it seems like from a volume, I'm no engineer, but from a volume standpoint, that might not be 50-50, right? If you have a 18-inch diameter pipe, the amount of capacity to take on water isn't 4 times as much as a 4-inch pipe. It's like 20 times. I'm looking at you, Brad. I'm hoping you.
Brad's going, man, that was a long time ago. Don't make me know that.
I don't understand. It depends on condition of the pipe. It depends on, height of groundwater in there. It depends on, inflow into the situation, for the other part, inflow, so inflow versus infiltration, right? Inflow is improperly connected pipes, people putting their downspouts and the like. We're not going to see a lot of that in the public system right there. Public system receives a lot of that, but as we go out and test for those kind of things, that's mostly on the private side that we would have to correct those kind of things. Happens all the time in this room, don't worry. So it's really, again, we could probably go back and forth and say, it could be that, it could be that. That's where it's really the difficulty in this is really, how do you separate this out? So what we're able to do with this study, and this is a limitation of this study, and I think it's a fair point you're making. We're limited in how we can actually granularly assign and say, this is from this, lateral right here and not from this one, or this is from the public, which is why we're looking at holistically, we understand this is the, however it gets in there, if we'll allow for a moment us to move past that and just say holistically in a moment, we have a problem with our city and the public system that serves the private residences here. Collectively, we have a problem. And this, based on our recent data, is the best model of what we know to be a problem. And this is how we need to then holistically try to move forward.
The other thing
That's our approach.
The other thing I could add, Aaron, is that What we're saying here is the problem still exists in the Laguna areas, but our forecasts show that with the rebate programs and the inspection upon sale, that's gonna reduce down to a problem that's manageable. What this is showing is these are the chronic areas where the pipe is full. And so we can't avoid it. We need to do something quick.
And that, I think that'll be more clear in the final report. So one thing that West Joe's will provide, we'll have exhibits that this is a very high level. This is max capacity issue. And then we have different levels of severity. So like Miguel said, there's still areas of concern in the two areas that are removed, but we feel it's manageable enough that they're not going to result in spills. So that's the layer that we're not seeing here.
Can I ask another, just a process question for you? When you're installing new sewer main, like in Choro Street, and you run across a connection of this clay into the old pipe, are you putting the clay back? Are you giving the owner a new lateral to the property line? What's happening there?
I could chime in. So we're gonna stub it out. It's usually 4 to 6 feet, depending on the lateral condition and how deep the main is. We'll stub it out. And our new standard is HDPE pipe. It's all electro-fused or butt fused pipe. So it's all not glued, it's all continuous pipe. Then we'll stub it out to the property. And it's usually either SDR35 PVC pipe, clay. Then prior to a large project, we'll actually send the collections crew out. We'll hang door hangers. I actually just spoke to Matt about this. He called me 3 or 4 weeks ago, discussed the program and just trying to let the property owners know, saying, hey, we do have a program in place. We can't really dictate the replacement of that lateral. We'll just say, hey, reach out to some contractors, maybe speak to the contractor, replace the main, here's, the programs the city.
Try to save some costs.
It might be a good opportunity because then we're not back in there having to dig it up and make the connection.
Agreed.
We're already tore up. So we do try to do that. It's a limited opportunity, but we definitely try to maximize that window.
I would think you guys would have the trenchless people on your speed dial and they could be going up and down the street.
That's not the cost is the asphalt.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. I would think that the city has an asphalt crew. It would be helpful if they were just paving all the time, right? But
which they are.
Yeah.
The point is, if I was living on Choro Street and they said, hey, we're going to be opening up the trench, I'd be calling my trenchless guy and say, dig to the trench and meet Ryan Stubb. And that would say, we build a road and then we cut it up with all these potholes and it's like, oh my golly.
So
suboptimal.
A couple things I wanted to add, and I totally see the frustration because as the collection supervisor, I'm hearing it from both sides. We see where, it's impacting developers, homeowners, and we're trying to do our part. We're just not trying to put it on, the developers or the homeowners. So just kind of wanted to highlight our programs. We have an inspection crew that runs every day, Monday through Friday. And just looking at the previous reports from last year, they videoed 18,000 feet of main. And we're looking for root intrusion. We're looking for any source of an I&I. I have my own, my goals are I&I reduction within the collection system. So we're not really highlighting that right now, but that's our big goal, replacing mains. We're doing a lot of point repairs, anything we're like, hey, this could be a source. And we'll sometimes see running water coming through a joint and immediately we're scheduling a repair to, mitigate that I&I. So just looking over the past 10 years, with the offset program and the lateral programs, point repairs, main replacement, you could just go down the list, that all starts adding up. And I think that's kind of what we saw during this flow study. And again, we asked those hard questions to West Geos and we're like, is this data right? Was the previous data, bad? And we really went through those courses before we submitted this too. So
So going kind of the follow-up question, so it seems like there's kind of a good news story about the green coming off, like, hey, through a collaboration of public investment and private investment, we've been able to take these areas to be kind of back in a normal state, right? So the area that then has now been added, is that because there's been an increase in intensity, like a lot of ADUs in those areas, we have more people, or are those, is that kind of red area that wasn't part of the 2015 impacted area, are those new because better data or more intense use or more failures, right? I guess it's, or, yeah.
Great question. There is a bunch of construction going on downstairs, sorry.
Yeah, okay, you can talk loud, we'll hear you.
Chris, there you go. Yeah, I think it's a combination. I would really like to, here we go. Patrick or Jeff or Chris, did you hear the question? So we're looking at this, the downtown area in that layer that shifted north. And the question that we're all having is, I understand it's going to be a number of reasons, but trying to get some more understanding around why that shifted north. And, this might be something that we have to, at least that I have to dig into a bit further to understand.
Yeah.
Still, but
I think I heard the question. I can't tell if I'm interrupting somebody.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So, well, not to be flippant. I mean, the answer is yes. I think you named the list of reasons why things have changed from one to the other. Data,
Hold on one second. We're going to have you strategically.
Are you hearing me okay? Is this loud enough, or do you want me to shout?
That's good.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, I'll speak loudly.
I'll just as it goes.
In terms of good data, bad data, we're putting monitors out in the field, back in for the 2015 study and for the current study, during the time where it's most likely to rain, and you get what you get, right? So the nature of the storm that occurred back then that was captured versus the storm this time that was captured could be different. And I wouldn't say in either case the data is bad. I don't, relatively speaking, is one better than the other? Well, we won't ever know that, but we do have some confidence in what we saw this time, that it was a decent sized storm. It gave us a picture of how we got a good picture of how the collection system behaved for that particular storm. So I think part of it is just having a slightly different situation that was monitored, but I think there could be some pipe deterioration that's gone on. There could be more infill development, EDUs that have increased flows, but I think a lot of it is, the collection system is dynamic, and it will change over time, and as more laterals get sealed up and improved and replaced, more mains are replaced, you do correct problems over time, and meanwhile other things are happening in other places that might be opening up some joints and some leaks. So I don't think there will be a single smoking gun. I think it is a combination of those things, and the best you can do is keep monitoring and keep watching and try and stay ahead of the situation as things change. And so, the red areas are driven by pipes that we have a lot of evidence or a lot of confidence in concluding that there's pipes that could result in a spill if in these future peak flow conditions, and we need to do everything we can at this point to prevent that from happening because of the knowledge that we have at this point. Meanwhile, I think doing the monitoring, doing the, you know, more flow monitoring is always better. And I think it sounds like, you know, utilities is on the right path to do that and kind of stay ahead of the shifting, changing situation out there. So sorry, I don't have the answer, like why exactly did it change, but those are the things that go through my mind when I hear that question.
And
Thank you.
just to reemphasize, I think I have a concern that shifted. And so we don't want to wait 10 years to update this model. We want to be able to do it on a more frequent basis. So those online monitors, we can recalibrate this model more frequently. That's what we want to do. Want it to be accurate to current conditions, but we don't want to work on assumptions from 10 years ago that might not be accurate anymore. So I think that's maybe one difference between the last study and this one moving forward, is we want to tighten up the update to this, and we want it to be as accurate, you know, for current conditions as we can. And I'm really hopeful that's going to help with those online meters.
So Andy, I think two things. One is your question about adding units and that creating the capacity constraint. I think fundamentally the math is a house is putting a couple hundred gallons a day into the sewer, right? So if we're talking about a 10 million gallon sewer issue, I don't know that. And I mean, this kind of gets to this equivalency of replacing a leaking lateral for a new unit, right? So that's a really sticky wicket. And like, I don't like getting into the math of that's probably complicated. But what I will say is that if you guys are talking about doing this in a changing way, that is super scary for developers, right? And we're in an entitlement environment where it's taking months and years to get larger projects entitled. And so the idea that within a year, the map could shift. And if you have a project with 10 units or 30 units or 100 units, the value that would cost you is super high. So I would probably warn you against touting that this could be a variable system, because for us, that just sounds like risk.
That's a good point. I think that was one of the discussions. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the footprint and
permanently
make this go away.
That's the goal. And if we can get there sooner than another 10 years, let's do it.
I'll just say, we don't like this program much.
Yeah, no, I'm not, yeah.
We don't want to live in this environment, but we also have to say is we have some hard evidence of going in the past 5 years since we've been monitoring that from 34 spills to 1.
Yeah.
So something we're doing is being successful towards keeping raw sewage out of the environment and away from people's, where it's going to cause health issues. So we're being successful from a public and private partnership on this. But I totally hear your point. We don't want to move too fast, is what you're saying on updating this. It shouldn't be ping-ponging every time we get a little bit of additional data or something. Unless it's a benefit.
It will be added,
Yes.
but
And that's a fair, and we're joking about it, but it's actually fair. And that's what we're trying to do, is say, we can manage risk on knowing that we're going to continue to make areas. And that's why you see some of the blue areas that have been removed. We're moving them in the right direction. We can take that burden off of the development community right there. But is it totally solved over there? No, it's not, but it's moving in that direction where we can comfortably say, with the data we're showing and the work that Ryan and his team are working on, we have been able to, through this process, move from 34 spills 5 years ago to 1 right now. So it's effective. It's not pretty, and no one likes it.
And I think that's the discussion.
I don't think that's exactly how I'd say it to council, Andy, but
I think that's the discussion we've been having, like how, for the next 10 years, how can we paint a picture for anybody that's investing on a property and developing so that they know what the conditions are and the costs are gonna be. So that's the objective. We're trying to get to that point so that we can paint a picture and say, okay, here's the next milestone and the next goal.
it's 5-year increments, instead of 10.
Could be, yeah.
Comment though.
Well, my oversimplified question is, I'm sure like any new infrastructure, there's a reserve that's built into the rate people pay, right? Like if you've got a new main line, there's some amount that's being allocated from ratepayers that goes into reserve to eventually replace that pipe.
Yeah.
In general.
For the public.
You're talking on the public side.
Yeah. And then it seems like I don't know, I think sometimes we get so specific with these things. I think it's amazing that we're focusing on where the next attention needs to be, what pipes we're looking at, which ones need to get fixed, all that stuff. But it could be way simpler. It doesn't necessarily need to be, if you end up inside one of these areas, you have to do X, Y, and Z. It could just be the whole system. This is just the area we're focusing on right now. I mean, I've always just felt like from a city of San Luis Obispo standpoint, the sewer system's a sewer system. I don't care if I'm in a constrained zone or not. It seems like adding more units, period, there should be just like a marginal increased cost that you're gonna pay a fee towards overall improvements, and then you guys figure out where the best places to apply that is.
I would agree, except where I think we would be missing on that is that 50% of the system that would not get replaced, because the city is not able to put those funds directly towards replacing the private sewer lateral infrastructure. We can't replace private lines right there.
Right.
And that's
Well,
50% of the
do the
system.
reimbursement program, and it does seem like regardless of whether or not that's a private improvement or not, it affects your system regardless.
It has, and that's why we were able to make legal findings where council actually adopted those findings, that we can put some monies towards that because we recognize the fact that we can't make the improvement that will benefit the whole city on just the public side. So we had to make legal findings, council did,
Right. So
that
like,
allowed us to do that.
understood. So hypothetical, let's say we never added another unit ever. We just froze everything, we're done, we're changing, this is the static sewer system. Those laterals still will eventually cause problems and still eventually need to be replaced.
Mhm.
So there would still probably be some allocation of funds.
Not, I mean, we could still continue with that rebate program, and the rebate program is still also available for people who in their own house say, hey, my lateral is aging. I still plan to live here for the next 50 years, but I recognize the fact that, you know, it's either my roots, I have such root intrusion that it's backing up inside of my house, or, you know, maybe they have some altruistic view of, hey, it's better for the whole community I live in. We could still supply with council approval those rebate programs to help that. But you would still have, I mean, the reality is as you're aware, that the new construction, like Ryan talked about, you know, HDPE, we're not getting as much I&I in any of those right there unless we have inflow with someone illegally connecting it to the sanitary system. We have an old system that is getting older by the day, and those are what continue to fail.
Understood. And I think, I guess where I'm headed at is I always tried to work towards just a simpler answer. And I think the reality is the marginal cost of new added supply, you know, units is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. And the bigger issue is actually the old infrastructure, whether private or public. And then the developer always gets asked to solve the old problems. That's just, I just want to make sure we're balancing these things reasonably.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's really the point of us right now asking for your input on it. I mean, if there are ways that you think that we can improve this program like that. I know when we've talked about this before, the conversation has been, hey, why doesn't the city just replace this? Or why doesn't the city take this on? And we've, you know, explained in the past, the cost barrier, you know, first off, if we would be replacing, it would be a gift of public funds at that point, above and beyond what we could legally make a finding on that has a community benefit. Also, if we take it on, we've been asked, hey, can the city just take this money on, hold it, you know, and then help us make individual contributions as, you know, private infrastructure needs to be replaced. We end up with an issue that if we do it, we're doing it at prevailing wage, and we're going to probably see triple the cost. I mean, so a $10,000 lateral is now going to be $30,000. And there's an argument that maybe that's a better thing, but probably wouldn't be coming from this group in this room that would make that comment. Other groups might make that comment, but I wouldn't anticipate that one from this one.
So I wanted to add one more thing. I know this keeps getting brought up about condition of the city sewer system. So during this study, we really wanted to kind of highlight that, saying, hey, how does the collection system look? We were able to pull a lot of our inspection data. We worked with a third-party company, and we actually created a condition layer and looking at overall pipe condition, just like you guys would get a condition for your sewer lateral. Say if you're doing a project, you're like, hey, the condition's poor. So we were able to do that citywide. It's pretty close to all the city mains, but we really wanted to look at not just the sewer laterals, because that's just one little piece in the big puzzle. So we were able to create that condition layer and look and saying, hey, where are high priority areas where we need to, replace? And that's gonna be within this.
And that's
report.
including video inspection.
Yep.
Right, so.
So we're.
Video
Yep.
inspection of the whole.
So it's really impressive, really cool. I was able to integrate that layer within our GIS system, and our crews were able to really highlight saying, hey, where do we need to do mainline, repairs? What can we do to help make this condition a little bit better? So just wanted to highlight that.
Perfect segue for my question. The city is benefiting from this research layer of video and monitoring and created this condition layer. What are the triggers for the city requiring private video? Is it just development, new development? I always get the help.
Point of sale.
Every sale?
Yeah.
And so if that data is being collected at every sale, I would think you would have pretty good data.
We have
It's new.
Yeah, we're collecting, and that's why we have 50% of it is still not captured though. So there's 50% of the laterals roughly. That was the yellow one, and I appreciate your comment on the color code on that. So to make it easier to visualize that, but there are still that many properties that have not switched ownership.
Have not switched on. Okay, so then the next question is, could the city, rather than back to this gift of public funds, create a rebate program to just video your, here's $1,000 to video, $500. I don't know what it costs to do that. There's $500 to video your system. As like a rebate program, have council direct monies to this, so you have better data collection of the old private that may never change. You're always going to have these unknowns, but if you gave an incentive or a way to gather the data on the private side.
I think we could. So let's walk down that. I mean, if you're willing to, because I think it'd be interesting. We know that there is also laterals right now that need to be replaced. We know that there's aging ones. It's how do you incentivize people to actually replace it? The $4,000 enough isn't, as long as sewage is flowing out of most people's houses, they're not going to do anything about it.
That's right. But I agree with your point, but as a homeowner, I may not fix it, but I would sure like to know if my big tree is the cause of my blockage every year.
Yeah.
And so it can be messaged as, take a look at your system so that, we're giving this to you so you learn something. You get the data, the city gets the data to say, oh, now we can see this thing is missing a whole section of pipe, and the owner sees it too. There's not a requirement for them to fix it, but it does help you pinpoint real problems instead of we think it's 50% or we think 25%. It's just more data is all. And I think it'd be relatively inexpensive. Anybody know what a sewer video costs?
Between $300 and $500, depending on the length of
cheap for data, I would think, especially if you concentrated in the red area.
It might pair well too with the matchmaking tool that Chris is talking about. So we could evaluate that, bring that back. It would be essentially a voluntary inspection program that, we could offer if folks were interested in doing that.
I can see that. I can see the downfall of it is somebody knows that their sewer is bad. They've got to disclose it whenever they do sell, but they're going to have to fix it anyway when they sell.
It happens either way at that point. So when it transfers ownership, before the escrow closes, it hits Ryan's shop. We independently evaluate it, and so they know.
Okay.
And that was the council adopted policy on it. I mean, what originally was something that was part of the settlement of the lawsuit was the council could have, you're no longer on council, so I'm just gonna be honest about this.
I remember two iterations, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
The original settlement in the lawsuit was that council consider adopting an ordinance that required mandatory replacement of a lateral in poor condition at transfer of ownership. They only had to consider it. They didn't have to adopt that. And what that would have done is force, we would have a whole different group here. Instead of sitting with developers who didn't like it, we'd have realtors, right? And that's, I can't speak to why it was or wasn't. That's a policy level decision. But ultimately, the decision was made to require inspection upon sale. But what we're really trying to get at is exactly trying to figure out how do we populate a database and how do we let homeowners know? We had really hoped that that system alone at the time would be a good driver for folks to say, hey, I'm buying this house from you and I'm inheriting a $10,000 liability. I think folks were, I'm gonna just speak a little transparently on this. I think unfortunately, many folks at the time with the housing crunch, and thank you all for trying to help us alleviate that. But with that crunch right there, I think some people were told, correctly or not, don't even raise that as an issue in this because some cash buyer will step in front of you and they won't raise the issue and they won't have to negotiate against it. So don't ask the seller to replace it moving forward right now. It did allow us to, you're giving me the look like.
I don't understand that.
If you have two buyers right there that are prospective buyers and one says, hey, I'm willing to buy this full cash, no questions, as is, and I'm not going to make you do any changes. And the other one saying, hey, I know you have a bad lateral and I'm going to have you replace it before I buy it at your cost as the seller, they're going to go with the cash offer right there.
What does that have to do with helping housing? I thought you said that was around, that was a kind of, that argument was based on the housing condition that we're in and not having enough housing. What is that?
Housing market conditions, the competitiveness. in
Yeah, the
housing market.
competitive nature of it. That
He's
was
just
my
saying
comment.
when that demand is super high and everyone's highly competing, they're gonna be less likely to ask for the concession. That's all he's saying. As a buyer, you know that the lateral's bad, you're gonna ask the seller
You're gonna
to
take
fix
it
it.
anyway because you
Or
want
you're
the
just
house
gonna
so
You're
bad.
buying it
Screw
as
it.
is.
You're gonna buy it
Because
as
you
is.
have 10 other people
And
ready
I
to buy
know that
it.
I've got a $10,000 liability. That's just I know that going in because I don't want Matt to buy it.
Yeah, but
On a purchase, but you're not required to fix it.
Exactly, exactly.
So I'm sorry,
You know it's bad.
And that's where it kind of is triggered through, say, if you're wanting to add an ADU or add an extra bathroom, and that's where that's gonna be triggered and replaced. So eventually it will be replaced, but not during the time's point of sale.
But we had
That
hoped
makes
that that's where I was going with that, is we had hoped that that mechanism would really be a driver, that market would really help us see a lot of these get updated. And that's just not what we saw in reality. And that's why we also went back to council and said, hey, the $2,000 and $3,000 incentive probably didn't keep up with inflation and probably was a little too restrictive, and council, thank you, Andy, you were on there at the time, approved that. So we were able to bump that to $4,000 to try to find another way to incentivize it.
So just to clarify, I'm just curious. So you were finding that people were discovering issues.
Yeah.
And not resolving them.
As is, still, I'd say the majority, Ryan.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's still the majority of people just say, yeah, aware, buying it anyway. And it's, as long as it's flowing out of my house, fine. Maybe
Well,
that's a
I
little
would
cavalier,
also
but-
just think that most of the time when these laterals fail, they would back up.
Not always. I mean, inflow right there. If you have a large gap or crack in these clay pipes like that, is it still a gravity system and that groundwater is high enough, it's infiltrating in, it's going down, and not necessarily. If tree roots come in, then you have a problem. If you have a full collapse, you're gonna have a problem. But as long as it's flowing out of people's houses, I mean, Ryan has found issues where there's really a void in the ground where a pipe used to be.
I believe that.
And people are like, oh, hey, it's working at my house.
Yes, and that's where the term exfiltration comes in place, so.
But that goes to the visual level, that goes more through enforcement.
Yep, so there's different triggers, there's so many different moving pieces, like I said, if it does block and we're called out, that will trigger the video inspection, then
Then we move into a
homeowner
separate.
to for that replacement or
Then we're into an NOV situation and we're in
I think what I'm hearing from you, John, is that, we're gonna be going to council on August 19th and we need to present alternatives. One alternative could be to revisit the recommendation that we made in 2019. There's another path. It's not a popular one, but that is an alternative to the program. I don't know if we're ready to recommend that, but
Appreciate that.
Now look what you've done.
I know that's what I'm.
Right, like, I mean, I think
So
everybody in this
sorry.
room would appreciate to, at least if you guys pitch that at council, that at least say out loud, there's an alternative to putting it at point of sale and not take the onus from developers, like.
So, sorry, so you're saying at point of sale, you do a camera and if it's failing, then you have to replace it at point of sale.
Seems pretty fair that you replace your lateral on your house.
Well, right, I mean, that was kind of part of this interesting conversation and from a policy perspective, what's from some other development fee things, we use the term as our city is one big happy family. So we didn't overly burden some of the newer development areas in order to, kind of recognizing that the whole city benefits. So I think that's kind of an interesting back and forth in terms of the whole city benefiting from, being able to intensify some development in these impacted areas that happen to be in the older parts of town, right? So there is kind of a policy conversation to have at that level. But the real estate community and the cost of housing and a purchase to have that additional burden at that purchase time will have some other impact. So I think it's a perfectly fine conversation to have for the current council. And the community as a whole. While I have a moment and we're talking about alternatives and just how that program goes forward. So it sounds like in general, we have kind of a new map, but the crux of the program is that we're continuing with the impact where you have to replace the different laterals.
Right.
We're working on better identification of those properties. And I'm wondering in terms of folks who, would be opting in to get their lateral on the map, can it be reversed where people have to opt out? Like if they, if we know that they have an issue, let's put them on there automatically unless they tell us not to. Have, a clear, transparent system where they don't have to, but can we do that?
So I think we probably have to check with legal counsel, but I think you could as part, of the contract essentially you sign, you might say, hey, by signing this, you are allowing your property to be on the list. If you don't want it on there, please make a special, so we could probably set something up.
It could be easy. I'm not saying it has to be hard, but I'd rather have it easier to opt, that the default is opting in. Just because of that identifying.
So, Chris, do you want to discuss the document that's going to be sent out?
It's a voluntary waiver, right? Release of liability. We're not going to publish any personal contact information on the website. It'll simply be a symbol. But that document's been vetted through our legal team. If we wanted to consider an opt-out option, that we could have that discussion.
And that's within that document, they would have to go in and opt out once they opt in.
Right.
And there's several triggers, say if they're gonna sell the property and there's a bunch of other.
It gets potentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, just an idea.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I like the idea, Andy. I think it's solid. If you know that lateral is bad, mark it.
Yes,
exactly.
And those are marked. It's the ones that we don't have any data on that we're trying to get. This is the spirit of time. I wanted to close this out with some next steps and leave a few minutes for Keith and Gabe. But this is where we're headed. Again, hoping to conclude this report with West Yost by the 15th of this month. We're going to be going to council on the 19th, hoping to have a few of you there. That matchmaking outreach layer, hoping to go live with that in October. That's the target. We are going to be recommending an update to the general plan to reflect these new boundaries and have that on council agenda. We're hoping to take that and have it be effective on January 7th of next year. And then again, those new, that new data set for the offsets will be published on that portal as soon as these new boundaries have been developed. So that's the timeline for the next 6 months.
And Chris, you've got another presentation of the title companies and escrow officers.
And we're going
right?
to do, the other layer of that is more outreach to spread awareness, right? Hold people accountable that are doing these sales. But I'm hoping if you don't have my contact information, feel free to reach out directly. Here I have some cards, but I think it's been an iterative program, and we're trying to adapt to the feedback that we get. We want to make it most compatible with what you need and limit our risk at the same time. So we need stuff like this.
Thank you.
I've got one more quick
Can I
question.
bring up the commercial laterals again? You know, if the goal is to, prevent inundation into the laterals, you can have a commercial business that could be 10, 20 times out of a single family residence.
Right.
So why not include commercial, like a restaurant or a hotel?
It's
complex?
not the amount of effluent from the building, it's the length of the.
I know, but if you have a restaurant that's using 10 times out of a single family residence and they've got a crack or a hole in their pipe.
Yeah.
It's putting out 20 times the water that a single family residence would.
Not from the storm though. I had a long discussion about this, about how they applied the value for the amount of lateral we replace. They're just trying to stop the I&I. And so it doesn't matter how much the restaurant's putting out. All they care about is how much extra's in the pipe
Groundwater.
when it's raining.
But it's a fair.
Does that make sense what I'm saying, Matt? That
what if it's an 8-inch lateral?
Well, that's I think
Size of the lateral
yeah.
matters, that's true.
Another question, we've had other people in these meetings before, and I think others have been doing lateral replacements and getting credits and then holding those credits and selling them. Is that encouraged, discouraged? Do we do that? People making the change on their own for a credit, like we did the old toilets.
It's neither, we're not discouraging it. As long as it's not abused and, suddenly we're seeing a markup that's becoming a barrier or something, but it's not like there's a paucity right now of laterals that need to be replaced. But if that's helping people out, we'd love to see, we'd always hope that some independent third party would come in, as we've talked about before, and find a way to do this matchmaking. We haven't seen it yet. We've heard a couple people try it, but we're not going to discourage it at this point because we haven't seen a reason to discourage it. No one's really done it yet. But
the only thing I could add there, Aaron, is that want to make sure we don't incentivize just paying your way out of a problem. So we want to see the capacity get created. So when there's a big project and one of these intensified areas, we say, okay, what's the total size of your project? And when it comes through the entitlement packet, we can consider all the options that you have for the offset. So we'll say, okay, let's draw a ring around this project. That's your project. Here's the mitigation.
And we've tried to be creative on a couple of them of, hey, I need to replace all of these. Can we do a bigger section of Maine or something like that we know is, trying to find equivalents so that it is easier. It's less communication that the development community has to have with going door to door. So we have tried to find those creative pathways too. And council has approved us to have some latitude in that where we can try to make it a little more effective, a little more streamlined. But again, open to ideas if you have them.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of trying to make the developers solve a problem that has nothing to do with them. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
The new area around Cal Poly has been identified and looked like Foothill is the only area that's kind of the same as the prior. What city improvements are going to be done in those areas to help alleviate issues as well?
We do have some point repairs that we're going to be doing on, like Ryan says, if we go through our CCTV inspection and we identify a joint that's offset, we could do a point repair. So it'll be like a temporary Band-Aid. It'll seal up the system, but we're anticipating that part of that composite problem is also attributed to the lateral. So it'll be an education program. And this is good timing because once we get the report adopted, we'll be able to revisit our capital improvement project list in October and then potentially modify it for a budget supplement. So,
and that's the goal, is we have this never ending list. Where do we focus the money that we have? And that report being finalized will help refocus.
So it was mentioned for like Laguna Lake area, the lift station went in and that helped alleviate the problem a lot. But like the Foothill area is still identified as there are no big infrastructure.
We have this summer, we have one project at the intersection of Santa Rosa and Foothill. So that's the only one that we have programmed. But once we get this report finalized, there's probably 6 projects out there that we've been looking at. So we'll see how it trickles out. So there is a procedure that we'll go through.
So back to the Foothill area, we completed a large project 2 or 3 years ago, coming down Ramona Broad. So that was a large project. again, it's just kind of one piece of the larger puzzle. Obviously, that didn't make a large impact to the capacity constrained areas. And just kind of looking at that area, it's gonna take a lot of main replacement to, you know, and sewer lateral replacement, it's gonna take a lot to address that area. But just one more piece to the larger puzzle, so.
Oh, okay. We have a question online. Ian?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm on a job site right now. Somebody brought up the idea of there being an economy created of selling lateral credits. And I just wanted to say I've encountered that a few times where for like a small infill project where it would cost maybe 10 times as much as buying a lateral credit from a homeowner for say $4,000. So yeah, I do see that as an issue, and it is something that this program is creating an economy for that. I've seen an instance where a homeowner would have been totally happy paying $15,000 for a lateral credit, so they didn't have to go find out and replace a lateral in their same capacity constrained area.
Yeah, okay. Fair feedback, yeah.
Still haven't seen it emerge yet. Hopefully someone does pick it up, if, you know, at least another avenue to explore on that, but we have not seen anyone pick that up yet on the private side. And again, you know, the constraint on that being if the city picks it up, handles the money or anything else on that, then we end up in that prevailing wage situation.
So I know there's probably more questions and feedback. And again, if you can, I'm really hoping to get that as we draft the staff report for this project. Wanted to leave last 2 minutes for Keith and Gabe, but please send the feedback. And I have some cards if you take one.
The last thing I would say, Chris, is you know, I talk to every one of you all the time, and so I appreciate the feedback and really want to commend you for all the help and the partnerships that we've had. So really appreciate that. And then, you know, feel free to send us an email, and if you have any other ideas after this meeting, we'll consider those.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and I'm sorry to add on, but I would have to agree. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when we look at 34 wastewater spills going to 1, something is working. So thank you for helping out with this bigger project that we're all working on for the community. So again, we don't like it either. Sorry, but help us make it better.
Okay, Gabe, you have 1 minute.
All right. 1 minute. And I understand if people gotta go, please feel free to cut out. We'll probably talk longer than a minute. At the, I think it was May 15th meeting, Timmy shared a slide or some information about upcoming change or standardization of a form, everybody's favorite thing, standardized government forms, for our stormwater program. For those of you who don't know, the engineering division and community development, we review the projects, the stormwater regulations, right? Make sure you're complying with the regional board's requirements for PR 1 through 4. Any project that's subject to PR 2, 3, or 4, which are the higher tier PR requirements, has to have an operations and maintenance plan for the maintenance of the structural control measure, or SCM is what they call it. Think underground stormwater chambers, biofiltration planters, that sort of thing. The project has to have an operations and maintenance manual that effectively details what's in the ground, where it is on the site, what the expected life is, what the treatment capacity of this thing is, and who's responsible for maintaining it and how they do that every year. And there is an annual submission requirement for the owner or the HOA who's responsible for the maintenance requirement to submit something to Keith, who is the stormwater program manager for the city, who works with property owners, HOAs, and different groups throughout the city to make sure that they're submitting their forms online. Every year we have a new portal for submission of that form. Since joining the city a couple months ago, I've had a lot of really productive conversations with Keith, and the city has never standardized a template form for an operations and maintenance manual, which is effectively left a wide variety of what's gotten approved in the past. And where I really come into this is, and Keith sees this every day in his job, is whoever is left maintaining these systems often is not a trained professional, is, you know, the head of an HOA board is trying to figure out what they have to do every year to get Keith off their back. And they don't necessarily have all of the information in some of these documents that they would need to effectively maintain these systems. really where that gets tricky is if you're the property owner that has to maintain this thing long-term and the city's coming after you because the regional board could come after both of you, the city and the property owner, for failure to maintain this thing the way it's supposed to be maintained to meet its original design intent. So by standardizing this template, we're hoping to, one, save time in plan check and in plan preparation for your engineers that you all are hiring. They have a standard template. We have instructions. This is a screen grab of our website as it stands right now, and we're going to finalize this. But we have a new O&M plan template, instructions on how to fill this thing out, a list of different structural control measures that we recognize as a city with descriptions of what those are in case you're working with a designer that's never worked in this area before. And I'll actually click on the template and kind of walk through it. The big takeaway here is I think this is better ultimately in the design process while we're plan checking projects. It's better in the long-term actual maintenance of these systems, which will help with compliance with regulatory requirements, as well as just time savings for everybody involved at the maintenance side of things and also city staff side of things. But also all of the information that we're really requesting in this template document is either already being requested, but just not in a standardized way. Every firm that does this a lot has their own form that they've kind of been using. And oftentimes we have to ask them for this additional piece because they didn't add it on this version instead of that version. This document very prescriptively requests all of the information we need. And it's not going to add, I don't think, too much confusion in terms of how this all works, as we're really modeling how the county of San Luis Obispo has structured this. Oh boy, how do I get you out of the way? Let's do that. So I can try to zoom in here.
It's not sharing on the.
It's not sharing?
No. Hit the little down arrow on share.
For those online, I see Ian, your name. Are you able to see this share screen?
No.
Toggle it, Gabriel.
Gabriel, I can see it says stormwater post-construction requirements.
Okay. Are you able to see the template document that I pulled up?
No, just the slide.
Stop share. Stop. Yeah.
Oh,
There you
share the
go.
whole screen.
And then the application windows.
That one.
There you go.
Thank you. I don't use Zoom very often. Thank you. Are you able to see the document now? It says operations and maintenance plan for structural stormwater control measures.
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Thank you. So just quickly rolling through this thing. Obviously, project information. Where are you? What's the permit number you got approved? What are you building? Mixed use, whatever this is. The storm case number, which is assigned during plan review. So that's something that the designer would know. System owner information, right? Who's ultimately going to do this? The designer's information. Who designed this thing? What is it? How can we get a hold of them if we need to? And then we get into requiring an exhibit so that you can actually see visually where these things are all at. You'll have a legend, right? Biofiltration planter 1, 2, 3, chambers 2, 3, 6, whatever those are. We would have an ID identification number for each of the structural control measures and listing of what type it is. So underground chambers, number 1, biofiltration planter, number 2, that sort of thing. And then some basic information for the structural control measure, right? So is this for what water quality treatment PR is this? Is it a PR2 requirement, PR3 requirement, PR4 requirement? These type of SCM, the location of this SCM, the drainage design criteria, the design details, right? Manufacturer's information, if they're StormTech MC 4500 chambers, right? For example, you would put that information here, the expected life of the product, if it's got a product life. So typical information you would need so that somebody who has never been involved with the design or the construction of this project can pick this document up and read it and understand what they have, what they're supposed to do to maintain this thing. There are also standard inspection forms that will be included, which is a different link, but these are available online. And in the interest of time, I don't want to take too much time to go through all of them. But again, standardizing the inspection process so that each year the responsible party can go, oh, I have a chamber, I have a biofiltration planter, I need the form for each. And it runs you through everything we need or Keith needs every year to submit those inspection forms. Our plan with this is to go live sometime in the month of August. The reason for bringing this back to you all today was at what I heard out of the May 15th meeting was there wasn't any major concern about this, but folks just wanted to see what this more or less looked like and have an opportunity for feedback. So that's what I'm going to do by just opening it up for questions. But our plan is to get the final versions online on our website, And we would start directing applicants to, or your engineers that you hire, to pull that template document, go through the instructions and fill out this version of the document to accompany their submittal at that point in the development process. Another change that we're making in the background, which will ultimately lead to better results for the homeowner or the HOA, is right now, the way the city has structured it to date, the O&M plan doesn't actually get recorded on the property. So we record what's called the private stormwater conveyance agreement document, which is effectively a 2-pager with a bunch of legalese that says owner shall maintain their system, shall maintain it per the requirements of the plan that's on file with the city. And since 2014, when these regulations went into effect, the city's done a pretty good job of having these plans on file, but oftentimes it takes the owner calling the city asking for it. Keith has done an amazing job of making as many available online to homeowners when they're looking to upload their annual inspections. But one change we're doing is, as part of that stormwater conveyance agreement, we're now going to attach the O&M template as a recorded document as like Exhibit A. So that document will actually be recorded on the property. That helps with disclosure at time of purchase or if ownership transfers. It also then means that, in theory, whoever owns this property knows by pulling that document what they're supposed to do. But obviously the city keeps it as a backup. So it's just more publicly disclosable information. And again, that's consistent with how other jurisdictions in the area do it. But with that, unless Keith has anything to add, we're happy to take questions or feedback on all this.
Or you can contact Gabe separately.
Yeah. Or you can contact us. I'm happy to talk to you offline if you'd rather go to lunch. Mouse.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. This was a marathon meeting. Appreciate it. And we'll let you know when the next developers roundtable is. And we'll talk about hopefully some of the new state law changes. I have some questions and updates about ADUs I'd like to discuss with the team and whatever else pops up in the meantime. So thank you and go enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Nice on putting in a bunch of sewer pipes like that.
Really?
Yeah.